Hey Adam Staters. So earlier today in the MotionBuilder Discord, we were talking about auxiliary pivots, and it's a subject I'm super excited about. It's one of my favorite features of MotionBuilder and HIK in general. But I understand there was some confusion on how they're used and when they're supposed to be used. So I've come up with a couple examples here where I'm gonna explain how to create an aux pivot, how to set it up, and then how to use it in a couple different situations. I was planning on making a longer video, something with a higher production value that kind of discuss like what auxiliary pivots actually are, how they compare to auxiliary effectors, and why I use this method over other methods. But I understand that time is a factor here, so I'm just going to do a quick and dirty tutorial on how to do things like foot contacts and hand contacts so that you can quickly get this done. So to start, we have a simple animation of a person walking. I went ahead and exaggerated the walk cycle and kind of changed the linear path on it so you can actually see some foot sliding in here. And you can see it pretty clearly. Like as I slowly scrub through here, the foot slides pretty easily. So this is one of the easiest and fastest ways to use auxiliary pivots, and the one I use the most commonly. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna shift our feet into IK. We see the slide there. I'm gonna grab either foot effector, right click on it, and then go to create aux pivot. And when you do that, it's gonna create a little circle like this, and you get to position it right here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the one that's on the ankle and I'm going to snap it to the ball of the foot. Oh, you know what? No. Normally I would do that, but in this case, looks like the ball of the foot is a little bit lower than the effector itself. So I'm gonna go ahead and set a position where I think the ground contact would be. And for the sake of the video, I'm not going to be too exact with it, but just, kind of give you a general idea of where it's supposed to be. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select that auxiliary pivot, go into selection mode, so only this thing is selected, plot it down, plot selected. Now, this auxiliary pivot is going to have all the data from the ankle effector plus the offset that we've just given it. So if I turn this aux effector on, or aux pivot on, and turn the IK effector off, now our auxiliary pivot is driving this leg animation. But because we baked it down, it has all the exact same data as the leg. So now that we have our foot contact in place, the only thing we have to do from here is go into our curves, select our object, go into our curves, make sure we're on the right layer, and then boom, we can see our slide happening right there. So the only thing you really need to do is grab this curve, scale it down, make sure you're matched out, and boom, as I walk through here, wrong curve. Let's try it on the right curve this time. So boom, there's our slide right there. Gonna grab these keys, and usually I like to split the difference so we don't hyperextend in either direction. Grab this curve here, stretch it up. Grab this curve here, stretch it down because we don't want to see pops. And then, boom. No more sliding in that foot. Now we're going to see a little bit of hyperextension here because I exaggerated this data a lot just so we can see it clearly. But you can tell, looking at the foot, we no longer have sliding. And just to make sure we see it clearly, I'm going to go ahead and set a key on these guys' hips, so this foot doesn't come off the ground. There it is, nice and clean, no sliding whatsoever. So that's one way I use aux pivots, and it's extremely effective. I use it for my walk cycles all the time. Another example, and one that is slightly more difficult, I'm going to clear this foot effector, is what some people were talking about before with touching a flat surface. I'm going to move this box slightly out of the way. But you'll run into this situation all the time. You run into a stationary object where you're just kind of going palm first on the table or palm first on the wall, things like that. And the challenge is you can't lock it out. Like if I was going to take this animation here, and you can see there's a little shaking in the arm, I can't just go in here and set an aux effector and have that drive it, because the handles start to look very arcade. And that can work in some situations, but in most situations where a character is like leaning, shifting, moving around, we want that hand rotation still in place. So this is where an aux effector can really come into play. So I'm going to go ahead and clear the extra effect there. I'm going to slide this back so we can actually see the hand. I'm going to right click on this effector, create an aux pivot. Same situation. We're going to see a little circle here. And I'm just going to position that where I think our hand contact is going to be. And like 90% of the time, it's right about there. Right between the knuckles or right on the middle knuckle here. Right up against the skin. But I'll go ahead and set it somewhere around there. That is fine. Cool. And just like the foot, we're going to go ahead into selection mode, just select our aux pivot, and then we're going to bake that sucker down. There we go. We're going to turn the weight on the range on this up. So now it's going to be driving the arm, and as we slide through here, we see it has the exact same animation as the hand. Now, when making contact with something, you need two parts. You need your aux pivot, and you need something for that aux pivot to align to. So my favorite thing to do is to grab a null, which you can find in the Elements tab inside the Asset Browser. I'm going to bring this null in here. I'm going to kind of position it where I think I want it to be. I'm going to lock those out. And just real quick, I can snap it to it. I'll do translation only. And then bring it up so it's flush with the box. Right about boop, there. Cool. Alright, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my constraints. I'm going to find a position constraint, this little guy right here, drag it in, set this guy as the source, and then I'll take my aux pivot and I'll make this the driven. I'll zero this out, so the aux pivot will now be forced to go to the same translation as this null right here. And you can see it snaps right to it, doesn't move, doesn't do anything. Now, obviously that position constraint is going to have effect over the entire animation. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to take our aux pivot, we're going to turn it off. Alright? Then, we're going to go into our animation 1 layer. We're going to turn that layer off. We're going to mute it out completely. So even if I set a key, nothing is going to come through into the animation. And you'll see why I do this in a second. So next, we're going to scrub through our animation, and we're going to find the exact point where our hand makes contact. So I'd say right about on this frame here. And what I'll do, while I still have the animation 1 layer selected, I'm going to grab our aux pivot, turn it on, set a key, and you can see as soon as I set a key, it snaps right back to 0, and that's because I have my animation layer 1 muted. If I turn it on, that's still going to be snapped on, but I have turned it off right now. I have it muted. So you're going to find the frame where you actually make contact, set a key with the range set on, and then you're going to go to the previous frame and set a key with it set to 0. Then you're going to keep scrubbing until you find the very last frame of contact, which looks like to be right about, let's say here. And same thing, we're going to bring this up to 100, set a key, it's automatically going to snap to 0 because, again, my animation layer is muted. And then we're going to go to the next frame and set a key at 0. So this doesn't look like it's done anything, but if you go into our F-curves, you'll see, click on the weighting, we've created a nice little plateau for ourselves. So with this layer on, as I scrub through, the position constraint pops on only when we're making contact. This is a very, very, very clean and effective way to plan out your contacts without committing to anything. So we know exactly when our aux pivot is going to be on. Next thing we need to do is kind of blend in and out of it. And there's, a lot of people will do either blending in and out of the pivot or blending in and out of the layer. It's a much easier way to do it. So what you're just going to do, you're going to go into your body part selection mode. You're going to select a body part. You're going to look for that moment of contact. And you're just going to set a key. And then you're going to go back, find the next key pose to where you're going to zero it out. Looks like about right there. And you're going to zero it out. So now you should have a perfect blend from your FK motion to your point of contact. And you can see right away, there's no sliding, there's no shifting. It is a solid contact that still gives us the flexibility and the preservation of our natural rotation data. So you can kind of move this palm around, you can shift it, you can move it. And that's the benefit of an aux pivot. And then, same thing, we're going to go to the end here to clean this up. And the very last frame of contact, we're going to just set a key and then move it out to the point where it's at the next extreme pose and set a 0 key. So if we just play through it now, boom, crispy clean contacts. And the really great thing about this is through planning it out ahead of time and then just setting simple keys and zeroing them out over time, you avoid things like those magnet hands or the IK look and things like that. It's a very, very clean and effective way of doing this. So anyways, those are aux pivots for the feet and hands. I hope this helps. And if you have any more questions, don't hesitate to ask. All right, have a good one.